for like the drop-offs and stuff.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
the taller.
Yeah.
Well, he's not as tall as Elias, but he's like a brunette, tall guy.
That's such a great mix.
But yes, that's Kilo. So, what's her number currently set to at the moment?
14.
14.
Yeah.
Is that like her working number?
Yeah, but I'm open to letting you just
Figure it
help
out.
me optimize that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and give a tap here on the 14.
Okay.
Is it on continuous?
Oh, well, do you want me to just tap it, or it's like I can press it and then it just buzzes? Or I
Yeah.
can
So what
hold
we're
it?
going to use is the NIC function. Okay. So the M function on your remote there. So does this show M and C?
I have just this black one is what?
Yeah. So here, if you look, you see how that says C?
Yeah.
That's your setting.
Okay.
So what we're going to do, you see where that says M and C?
Yeah.
You're going to press and hold that. Now we get M and C.
Okay.
So this should be M, this should be C.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now the reason why we want NIC is continuous tends to be a little bit too abrasive that the dog doesn't really process it correctly.
Okay.
So what we want is just that little tap like that.
Yeah.
So if you ever see it say C or only M, that means both buttons are C or M. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we want M and I guess technically C, and the black one. So go ahead and give a tap on the black one.
This
Yep.
one, yeah.
Yeah, right there. So here, you see how she's kind of moving around a little bit?
Yeah.
So this is what I would call like perceptionist range, kind of lower end of the working level.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and bump her to 20.
What's this thing? There we go.
It's okay, and if you land 19, 21, it's fine.
Okay.
And tap,
That's 20.
tap. Let's go 25. Tap. Wait a second. Tap. Tap. 30. Yep. Tap. Tap.
So I can see a little
35.
more of like a.
Tap. Wait a second. Tap. Tap. 40. Tap. Yeah, wait 1 second. Right? Tap. Right. So you see here, that first tap, how much she did in response to it.
Yeah.
That's what I would deem as working number. So we have connection, perception, and working. Connection is when you see the twitch, but she's not caring about it. Okay. Perception, what's going on. Working level, like, hey, what was that?
Yeah.
And you want the hey, what was that? So like in the beginning, because we had some pretty good responses,
Yeah.
but I needed to see a little bit more worry coming from her. Okay. So as we work with her, that number may go from 40 down lower.
Right.
As she gets more sensitive, because she's having to learn a new style of e-collar.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So here,
Is it almost like how do I make that stop kind of reaction?
yes,
Yeah.
because so pressure, nobody likes pressure.
Right.
You drive?
Yeah.
Have you been on the expressway? Have you ever had someone drive really close to you?
Don't like it.
Yes. So you either speed up,
Yep.
you switch lanes, you hit the brakes, or you do nothing,
Uh-huh.
right? So they do that, put you under pressure to incentivize you to get out the way.
Right. Right.
Whether or not you do is a different thing. So same thing for your dog, or like kids growing up, peer pressure,
Yeah.
right? Making you feel a certain way to try to get you to do something you shouldn't.
Yeah.
So here, this is the same concept. It's pressure, it's just pressure in a different form, okay? So you have prong pressure or leash pressure. If I push down on the dog's butt like this, that's physical pressure. You have e-collar pressure. You have spatial pressure moving into your dog. So the pressure is all over the place. Whether or not we perceive it that way is something different, okay? So that's why when people get into an argument, we get closer because we're putting confrontation on.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
to
Yeah.
increase pressure, or a bully
Right.
goes up to a kid, right, to make them feel uncomfortable, to get them to either retreat and or incentivize them to give them what they want.
Sure.
Okay, so same thing for your dog here. So that level of 40, maybe because she's already familiar with the environment, she knows like this is daycare and this is where she gets to play, right?
Yeah.
So, and when you go outside, you might find your number goes from 40 to 25, or maybe it goes to 60 because you're outside. So when you're doing this exercise of like finding the working number, it's going to reset every time you walk her because
Okay.
you're trying to find consistencies.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So in the beginning, let's say we always start at 15 and you work your way up, and maybe you see at 30 she's responding, but then when you're walking 30, she keeps trying to pull you. right? So 30 means it's exactly you would keep
Gotta
going
ramp
up
it up,
until
yeah.
the pulling stops.
Okay.
So then if it's like in a week you come back and you're like, you know what, Jesse, I would start at 15, or I'd bump my number to about 30, she'd start listening, but I always ended at 45, 50, and when I was at 45, 50, she was perfect. And I go, great, start off
there,
at 45 and
yeah.
50, right? So we're doing this because sometimes in the beginning you're starting out higher, but as the dog gets more conditioned, their number goes down lower. But we don't know. Some dogs go up higher and stay static. Some dogs go up higher and get lower, right? Or some dogs start off lower, but then go up higher. So it's always like you're just trying to figure out what is my dog gonna do,
Right,
okay?
right.
So I'm gonna coach you through the healing exercise. I'm gonna demonstrate it for you,
Sure.
and then I'll coach you through it. So I teach traditionally on the left. Does that work for you?
Yeah, the only concern I've ever heard is just like walking on the sidewalk that puts her in constant like
Past
running
dogs
into
and
other
stuff?
dogs and stuff, yeah.
So, I mean, if your training
Ruby
is
really
good.
likes a personal bubble on the sidewalk, like to stay away from other dogs.
Okay.
Does that make sense to maybe in that case put her more on the right or
So think of it this way. What's
Yeah.
your preference?
right side?
Okay, then we're gonna go right side.
Okay, cool.
I don't go by the dog. I go by
Let's-
the human.
I'll consistently stick to the right side. How about
Okay.
that? Yeah.
So what we're gonna do, and you will probably have to remind me. So if I start talking about the
Yeah,
left,
yeah.
just say she's trained on the right.
Gotcha,
Okay.
yeah.
So here, when we do right side,
Yeah.
is every time I'm gonna give you 3 instructions: turn, tap, or pull to the right.
Okay.
So every time she passes you, I'm gonna say the word turn. When I say turn, you're gonna 180 turn to the left like this. Okay. Ruby might pass you. I'm gonna say turn to the left like this. She passes you, turn to the left like this, okay? Always to the left, always a 180 turn, okay? Keeping it fluid, you don't wanna stop, turn, and then go. You wanna immediately just turn to the left and keep going like that,
Okay.
Next thing would be tap. So we're gonna combine turn and tap, and we're gonna combine them together. So she passes you, turn, tap, 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 good girl. She passes you, turn, tap, tap, good girl. She passes you, turn, tap, 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 good girl, okay? So every time I say tap, that's one press of the button. So if I say tap, 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 that's your rhythm. If I say tap, 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 that would then be your rhythm, okay?
Yeah.
Last thing would be pull to the right. So as you're walking with her, she might flush to your left side, okay? So as you're walking, you'd pull to the left, start tapping.
Oh, and she goes here.
Yeah,
instead
she
of to
should
the right.
flush to your right side, exactly.
okay.
So what we're doing is eliminating options,
I see,
okay?
yeah.
And then when I say good, that's more so for Ruby,
Yeah.
more so for you, not Ruby,
Yeah.
because she doesn't know what good means, okay?
Yeah.
But that's for you to know, like, okay, Jesse said good, so that must be what he's looking for me to teach.
Just in terms of the previous training, we learned, and I think it'll work in this case, but we learned good as like when you place on the bed, I say good, and that's where she stays. So she does kind of get it.
Like the concept of what the word is.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's just a marker word. I use it more for the human.
Sure.
So when you hear me say good, if you see and she's like right here, like, okay, Jesse liked the fact that she's
Yes,
here.
yep.
Okay. So for your slack, actually where you're having it right there is perfect.
Okay.
So you see the bottom of your leash, how there's a little bit of slack. You see how it's kind of in line with her armpit right there?
Yeah.
That's like the perfect length. Anything longer than that would get caught underneath her legs.
Right.
Anything shorter than that would not give her enough space to make mistakes.
Gotcha.
And she needs to make mistakes in order to learn what
Give
not
her
to
the
do.
space to make a mistake, kind of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because we tend to shorten the leash and
Yeah.
walk with a tight leash.
Right, yeah.
But that gives the dog no option.
Yeah.
Okay. So questions?
Nope. Always turning to the left, basically, and then.
Correct. Always turning to the left, always immediately. And then I will coach you through the rest. Okay? Any other questions?
I'm sure I'll make a mistake.
Yes, everybody makes mistakes. Okay? So what I'm going to have you do is go and start walking back towards that white wall.
Okay.
Yep, you're going to walk in a straight line. Good. Turn, tap. Good. Keep forward, nice and relaxed. Turn, tap, tap. Pull to your right, tap. Good. Relax. Good. Pull to your right, tap. Good. Now turn. Good. Tap. Good. Keep relaxed. Keep forward. Good. Good. Slow turn here. Good. Keep forward. Good. Pull to your right, tap. Good. Keep forward. Good. Tap forward. Tap forward. Slow turn. Go ahead and bump your collar 5 levels. Tap. Pull right tap. There you go. Good. Keep forward. Good. Good. Slow turn. Keep forward. Good. Tap forward. It's okay. Keep forward. Good. Pull to your right. Tap. Good. Relax. Good. Slow turn. Good. Yep. Keep forward. Tap. There she goes. Better. Got a girl. Good. Slow turn. Good turn. Keep forward. Good. Tap forward. It's okay. Keep forward. Slow turn. Good turn. Slow walk. Keep forward. Slower. Slower. And stop.
It seems like she's defaulting to be a little bit behind me.
Yes, because now that we're increasing the pressure, she wants to avoid the pressure.
Oh.
Right? So typically, if a dog is forging, what people tend to do is they'll tap the dog to bring them back like this.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is it's too complicated for a dog to figure out.
Right.
So what we're doing here is when, so the first couple times she gave me the opportunity to tap, turn and tap, but then she started to lag. So then we started tapping for the opposite, which was to speed her up.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So her general rule of thumb is for you, her left shoulder to your right leg. Okay.
Yeah.
So she's thinking, well, every time I pass him up, he turns and then taps. So if I hang back here.
Okay, so it's just like the way she's rationing her way through this, like.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in order for her to learn what not to do, she technically has to do it, have a correction applied, but there has to be something that shows her what to do instead.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you're walking with her, when she passes and you turn and you're tapping her, she feels the collar. She's like, I don't like this. And she sees you going the opposite way. She catches up, it disappears. But then if she passes again, the collar turns back on. She's like, hey, I don't like it. It's back. Oh, now dad's going that way.
Right.
She catches up and disappears. So the problem with when the dog forges and we either yank them or remote them to bring them back is because we're going in the same direction, they cannot decipher why. Okay, because they jump back and you'll see the dog move back and they'll look at you like, what was the correction for?
Yeah.
But since you're going the same direction, she doesn't figure out that it's, oh, because I'm going too fast. So that's why the turnaround is important. Because for her, she's thinking, I felt this, I don't like it, I turn around, and dad's now going the other way. But when I walk up and I catch up to dad, everything disappears.
Gotcha, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it has to be blatantly obvious to the dog why they're being remoted.
Yeah.
And that's why that turnaround is so important. And the turnaround is a permanent thing. It's something that, to this day, if my dogs were to pass, I would turn and tap to correct them.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, because people think like once the dog knows how to walk at your side, you would just tap them, right? I go, depends. Whenever they pass you, it's always turn and tap to tell the dog, don't go that way, I'm going this way, okay?
Right.
Now, as you train her, that's why that number is important. Because let's say we operated at 15 and you're outside with dogs and people going on, right? Is you would be turning forever. Because 15 is not enough to dissuade her to not try to get
She
ahead.
would feel it, but wouldn't be compelled to
Correct.
listen. Yeah.
And that's why we kept going up. And then I said, when we hit 40 and all of a sudden she was doing all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I was like, there, that's the
Yeah.
working number. Because she's like, whoa, I really don't like what just happened there. So
Yeah.
we're gonna use that to shape everything else. So the working number makes it important from the get-go.
Okay.
So this is why a lot of our dogs, we do class 1 to class 2, they're like, the dog is great. Because we're starting at that number as opposed to starting at this low number and hoping one day it works.
Right,
It's
right,
just not how it works. So like I get dogs that come in trained on like 8, especially with this tool.
Yeah.
A lot of trainers use this collar and they'll come in and the owner's like, well, the trainer got my dog to listen to 8. I'm like, yeah, but you're not a trainer. And the real world is not a controlled context.
I'm this person for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, we're gonna find the number. The dog tells us everything,
Yeah.
okay? Now we did get a couple of vocalizations,
Yeah.
okay? Now when we get vocalizations, the rule is typically we go down, The reason why I'm ignoring them for now is sometimes in the beginning, while the dog is learning, they'll vocalize, so then we go down lower, but then the dog goes back to not doing what we want him to do. So you're kind of just going like this up and down, right? So when you were tapping and I saw her kind of run up to your leg, I go, good. So I was going, okay, she's yipping, but at the same time, she's also giving me the behavior I'm looking for, whereas at 40, she wasn't doing it as easily.
Sure.
Okay, so even that jump of 40 to 45.
It's pretty significant in terms of response.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can even go up 2 to 3 levels and you'd find like, oh wow, that causes the big difference.
Yeah.
It's just how the dog receives the collar.
Yeah.
Okay. So here, when you tapped her at 40 when she was stationary versus 40 when you were walking, did you see that difference?
Yeah.
It wasn't as impactful.
Yeah.
Right? She was taking it and turning and moving with you, no problem.
Yeah.
Because now there's movement involved. So movement is actually a distraction. So like when you're finding your working number, like you might find like, okay, 40, right?
When we're sitting still, 40, but once you start moving,
it might go up higher.
I gotcha, yeah.
And then, so that's where when you're actually in the movement of heel, that number may change yet again.
Right.
Okay, but at least you're starting at 40 and you get there faster because it's only maybe 45, 50. But if we started at 15 and you're trying to start your walk at 15, well, 15 to 40, 45 is a pretty big jump. So you would be stuck in that lower range for a while before you finally hit the working number.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why we always do it stationary, because it's easier to pick up on and be closer to your actual working number when you're stationary than when you were to be in motion.
Yeah. So just so I understand, like heel is more of a walking position rather than like a verbal command in your mind, or do you
right.
teach?
So heel, so we will use a verbal cue.
Oh, okay.
But in the beginning, we don't use it because you want to teach the behavior first.
Okay.
So I'm always delayed.
Just get her used to like being kind of here, like
at your
how
side.
to react to different like me turning in ways, and then you go back to teaching the cue.
Correct.
Okay.
So we shape the behavior first, and then we smack a name on it.
Gotcha.
Now, right now, do you hear that?
The whining?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can correct that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So when you're outside with her, behaviorally, how is she with you? Shh.
When we are walking or standing still?
Both.
She sticks pretty close. Not so much, not like this. I mean, this is like a nervous panting that I don't really see in her very much.
Sure.
It's not like this. I would say she wants to, like, she'll be pulling a little bit in a way that she's not doing right now, but less whining.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when she starts to get whining, do you notice something going on in the environment?
It would be if, like, there's somebody she knows that she wants to go, like, say
Okay,
hi
sure,
to.
like excited whining?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So like, let's say you're out on a walk with her and you're just stationary and you're at a red light and all of a sudden you're starting to hear her whimper or something, I would take a look around at what's going on.
Okay.
Okay, and if you notice something like, oh, there's a person with a funny hat,
Yeah.
right? And then every time you start to hear a whimper, you notice like there's a person with a funny hat, right? And you know it's potentially a negative thing,
Yeah.
correct it. Okay?
With the
e-collar.
Okay.
Correct. So then right there, you're telling her, don't worry about the person with the funny hat.
And that works?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why the working number is important.
Yeah.
Okay. So the thing here is when we use e-collar as a quote unquote punisher, the dog has to know how to turn it on and turn it off.
Yeah.
That's why this exercise is important.
Yeah.
Because when she's here, it's off. When she's there, back there, or way too much over there,
That's when
it goes
she's gonna
on.
get, yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
she's thinking, when I stay in this bubble,
Yeah.
it turns off.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of like the game of lava as a kid, right?
Yeah.
You could step here and here and here, but not there, there, and there.
Right.
Same thing for your dog. So if she's thinking, oh, there's certain things that I can do or not do to prevent that from going off, is that exactly? See what she does? And relax. And then when she lays down, I'm going to have you use your prong collar, subtle pressure going up to reposition her into a sitting position.
Okay.
Up. And then relax, just like that. So every time she tries to lay down, you're going to pull up. Okay? If you have to correct her again for the whining and she moves, you'll counter her with leash pressure instead to sit her immediately.
Okay.
Okay? So right there, and that was a good catch. She started to whimper, boom, you
Yeah.
kicked in. Right away,
Right.
she got up and was like, what do I need to do in
how do I
response?
make that stop? Yeah.
That's the working number.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So like, let's say in 2 minutes she whined again and you corrected her. 2 minutes later, she whined again. You corrected her.
I might have
2
to
minutes
bump
later,
this up a
you're
little
gonna have to
bit.
bump it up, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're seeing, okay, 45 will stop the whining for 2 minutes. but I want it to stop the whining indefinitely.
Right.
So how we can tell is I usually go by threes, okay? So if I correct the whining 3 times and the whining continues, I bump it 5 levels, and I reset my count, right? So I'm at 50. She whines, I correct it. She whines, I correct it. She whines, I correct it. That's now 3. I go to 55, reset my count.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like, let's say you're outside and you're practicing this pattern. Again, like I mentioned earlier, if you always end up at 75 when finally, and she'll stop the whining for 45 minutes, then you go 75 is the number for stopping the whining. Okay, because everything is gonna, every context may be a different number, but you just kind of get used to it.
Yeah, I totally got that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's gonna be exhausting for both of us. So you have to be like totally
in the
on.
beginning, So because in the beginning, the first week is always the hardest.
Right.
Because you're doing by threes, you know, you're doing the 5 level jump and everything, but that's to be quote unquote fair. Because you could jump, 35 to 85 and just tap her once, right? But then how do I know everything in between wouldn't work?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like when we deal with aggression, most people think we come in at 127, and they go, no, we come in at 15. And we work our way up.
Figure it out.
Exactly. And then when I'm at 80 and I find the dog stops the aggression and they come back the following week, I'm going to go at 80. And if it stops the aggression immediately, then I go, okay, 80 is the number to stop and then deter the aggression.
Interesting.
Okay. But we always start low and we work our way up, because if I come in too harsh, it might be so abrasive the dog does not learn anything. So that's why low to high is what we do, as opposed to reverse in the beginning.
Okay.
Now, if I get a dog that's pushy, right? And the owner's like, hey, Jesse, like it's much better, but the dog still forges. I'll go, now you're gonna flip it. You're gonna start off higher and you're gonna work your way
and
down.
Teach them that like as a reward to go lower maybe?
Not so much as a reward, but the dog takes it more serious because it is a firmer consequence.
Okay, I see.
So like if you get a $100 ticket for running a red light versus a $1,000 ticket, right?
Different calculus.
Exactly, you're like, well, shit, I don't wanna pay $1,000 again for just running a red light. Same thing for the dog. So, but in the beginning, it's always low to high, okay? And then if I find the dog is a stubborn dog, then we reverse it and I start to go a little bit higher and work our way down, okay? So now you tapped her at 45 for that whine. She's been quiet.
Seems like a good level.
Right? But prior, she had whined just like 2 minutes earlier.
Yeah. So she was testing like a little bit, or?
Right, so like she started to whine.
Yeah.
She resolved it on her own. We were talking about it and you're like, oh, I can use it to correct. I said, absolutely. She whined again, you caught it, and since then 5 minutes have gone by and she's not whined again.
Right.
So that's like, and that's my sensitivity level to this stuff.
Yeah.
Is I'm sensitive to all these things, that I'm able to catch it and then like already feel the difference of like, wow, 45 caused her to be quiet for 5 minutes. So it worked really well in this particular context.
Right.
Okay. So the first like week or two is always like kind of,
toying with it, workshopping
exactly.
it,
And then eventually you're like, okay, 45 for the whining, 55 for healing outside, 25 if we're inside Home Depot. You just learn all these, ranges.
Yeah.
You don't even think about it anymore.
One question I had, and not that this happens a lot with her, but it has, where if like fear is a real component, when does this become just too crazy for them to also, like, what would be an example? Okay, like we were in the car with my parents and their friend approached the car and she was like freaking out. And I think it was kind of surprising to me, but I guess the boundary was breached or something. But and I was using this to try to be like, stop barking, but I felt like it was escalating it or elevate, do you know what I'm talking about? Can it like worsen the
yes
situation?
And no. What was the highest you went in that situation?
I think 25.
Okay.
And it wasn't with this Nick setting, but
the continuous.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big factor right there.
So is that bad in that situation?
So it's not so much bad.
Yeah.
So that's what I said. That's why I had you switch.
Yeah.
Because I said, so continuous, I think of it as an emergency function.
Yeah.
It's not bad. But 99.8% of the dogs I train are all trained on neck.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? Continuous, every now and then, a dog, if she lays down, that's just prong pressure, a dog will respond better to continuous. But in 10 years of dog training,
mostly neck is the way.
I'm probably looking at 2 to maybe 3 dogs that I've trained in my career that did better with continuous.
It's interesting. Yeah, I've been taught on the continuous.
The neck function allows space for the brain to process.
Okay.
Okay, because it's lightly up. There you go. It's tap, 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 right? So she's taking the hits and thinking to herself, how do I stop this tapping from returning? Whereas continuous, it's on, and then it's off.
Yeah.
So when the dog is so under pressure, they can't think
Yeah.
in that moment.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, I don't have any tattoos, but I would imagine being tattooed, right? And then trying to have an in-depth conversation at the same time, I would feel like that's a bit much.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Same thing for your dog. You know, you're putting her under continuous pressure. She cannot process the situation correctly, right? But if she's lunging and barking and it's tap, and she's lunging, tap, and you're increasing the pressure, and eventually you tap at like 45, and all of a sudden she jumps back. And she's like, oh, wait a minute. When I jump back and stop barking, the pressure didn't return.
Yeah.
Right? So there has to be space in between so that the dog can learn how to turn the pressure off. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think a few things happened there. Continuous for sure.
Yeah.
We want to be on Nick. You're potentially weren't high enough.
Yep.
Because for you, you're like, oh, that's a friend that approached the car. But for a dog, this is our territory. Did she know the person?
No, it was a new, yeah.
It was a new person?
Yeah, and I could kind of put myself in her shoes, but yeah.
Because
I just didn't know how to use this properly, I guess.
Correct. So, and potentially, if heel has not been taught with remote collar,
Yeah.
harder for the dog to turn off the pressure. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's why we start off with this first.
I see.
Because this teaches the dog how it turns on and off. So just what you did right now and applying it to the whining, that was able to happen because of literally those 3 to 5 minutes of what we just did. Because she's thinking this turns on and turns off. How? When I'm here, right? So this is her reference point. So then when we applied it to the behavior, she's like, okay, I do know this goes away. So she kind of stopped the whining and goes, okay, well, ever since I stopped whining in response to the collar, it never came back again.
Right, right.
Okay. Other questions?
No, for now.
Can we correct Cooper with the collar and Dexter? So I think that's what happened in the car. Plus also higher stress situation, potentially, and 45 may not be enough in that moment, right? So when you ask, can it make the situation worse? Yes, because you're not at the appropriate level yet, okay? Or it's too much pressure. So continuous would be too much pressure, okay? The next thing would be we weren't high enough. We hadn't layered in the collar correctly in a way that she understood how it turns on and off. Lastly would be, if you're in the car and it's a confined space, she might feel more defensive there because it's such a small space as opposed to being outside where we have open space. Okay, so all these things are variables, but I've never had a dog that we could not shut down as long as we had the appropriate power.
Like layer in all the lessons and everything. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
As long as we have the appropriate power to the dog, the situation, everything, it really shouldn't be a problem.
Cool.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we're gonna go back to the peeling exercise with the back and forth stuff.
Okay.
So go ahead and to your right side. Yep. And then go ahead and turn off and move towards the wall. Yep. Yep, pull to right. Yep, now slow turn. Good turn. Keep forward, good. Turn, tap. Yep, keep forward, good. Good. Slow turn. Good turn, keep forward, good. Tap forward, good. So you see how she kind of runs up to your right leg there?
Yeah.
Good. Tap forward. Add a girl, good. Slow turn. Good turn. Keep forward, pull right tap. There you go, good. Slow turn. Good. Keep forward. Tap. Good. Slow walk. Slower. Good. Tap forward. Tap forward. Good. Slow turn. Tap. There she goes. Good. Good. Add a girl. Keep forward. Yep. Good. Slow turn. Good. Slow walk, keep forward. Pull right tap. Good. Now relax. Good. Oops. There she goes. Good. Slow turn. Good turn. Good. Go ahead and speed up a little. Add a girl. Slow turn. Good. Slow walk, keep forward. Keep arm relaxed, good. Now slower. And stop. Okay, now here, right? Now go ahead and step back to be like next to her. Like that, that's fine, good. So right now, I'm gonna ignore that she's hanging back because since it's the first class and we're indoors, sometimes the dog will lag because of pressure or they'll lag because of like the setting.
They're not used to being on leash inside kind of situation.
Right,
Okay.
you know. So here, what's gonna really dictate how we approach that healing part is how she does outside. So like I had a client, his pit would be like 4 feet back inside, right?
Yeah.
And we kept tapping and bumping it, tapping and bumping it, and we hit the end of the class. I was like, you know what, just do this when you work during the week, right? He came back and same thing, she was 4 feet back. So then I asked him like, how does she walk outside? She's like, he's perfect outside. Like right on my side, right?
Yeah.
Up. So I was like, okay. I was like, then I'm not gonna care about in here.
Yeah.
Because outside the dog is actually walking where they're supposed to. Okay?
It's all context for them in a way.
Correct.
Yeah.
So here, I did see when you were tapping, it would speed her up.
Yeah.
But then she'd kind of end up delaying a bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I care about is outside when you work with her is that she speeds up but then stays at that right side.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So your visual cue is, or your visual kind of point of view and where she should be, her left shoulder parallel to your right leg.
Yep.
Okay, so it's kind of like if you're walking with someone, we walk shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, like with this, I could barely see her. I felt
'Cause she was- she was a
so
little
I
bit
feel
too
like
far.
okay, so the cue would be like as I'm walking, she's right there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I give dogs like a 1 foot bubble.
Okay.
1 foot to the right of it, 1 foot back,
Yep.
no distance forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so a dog should never be passing your side. So 1 foot to the side or 1 foot back within that bubble. Anything outside of that is considered too far.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if she's straying too far to the right, you could either keep walking forward and tap to bring her in closer, or technically you can also abruptly pivot and tap to bring her to your side. There's no right or wrong answer. So most of the time people just move forward and tap to see if it brings the dog in.
Yeah.
The e-collar should never feel like an argument. So if you're constantly turning and tapping, and she keeps pulling you, that tells me we're too low.
Yeah.
Okay? So earlier I talked about my 3 tap rule.
Yeah.
So I have my 3 correction rule and or 3 tap rule. So let's say you're finding your working number. You start at 15. You're stationary, right?
Yeah.
15, tap, 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 no response. 20, tap, 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 no response. 25, tap, 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 no response. 30. And you keep doing that. So every 3 taps, if you don't see a response by the first to third tap, I bump it 5 levels. So that's actually what we did here. I only started to space out the last ones because I wanted to see if the next time it came in, would it be impactful?
Yeah.
And you would see her like take it and she would kind of like look around and she was not caring until we hit the 40 range and then she was like, whoa,
Yeah.
what's going on? So like, okay, 40
Yeah.
is the number, okay? So then you would start off, and that's how you would find your working number. Is start at 15, work your way up. Once you think you found the number, then you begin your walk. Now the working number may change because now you're in motion, okay? So now I have my 3 correction rule. So every turn and tap is 1 correction. So every time Ruby were to get ahead of you, you will always abruptly turn and tap to bring her back to your side. Okay, so that's 1 correction. So if it's turn and tap, turn and tap, turn and tap, and she's still pulling, reset your count, bump it 5 levels. Now I'm at 45. Turn and tap, turn and tap, turn and tap. She's still pulling, reset your count. Now I'm at 50. Turn and tap, turn, in the same process, right?
Yep.
Finally, maybe you hit 60, and it's turn and tap, boom. And now she's just right at your side. And you walk for 10 blocks. And you're like, man, ever since I hit 60, Ruby's not trying to pull. Or she's not trying to be reactive, or she's not trying to growl or bark or whine or whatever.
Yeah.
Then you know, okay, 60 was the number.
Yeah.
The next time you go for a walk, you start at 15. Work your way up. Find that starting working number.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 45. Then from there, you start your walk. Then you do your correction turns, right?
Yeah.
And then you end up back at 65 or something. And you're like, man, once I hit 65, Ruby was perfect. The next walk, you reset. We're doing this over and over and over again. So again, when I see you next week, how'd it go? You know, we start at 15, we'd end up around 40, but once we started to walk, 60 is when she was perfect. Start at 60.
Yeah.
Okay? So you're just doing the research to make sure that the number that we're getting is consistent.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, you might find it 60, but then by the third day, 60 drops down to 45.
Right.
Because now she's getting more sensitive to it. She doesn't need as much power.
Right.
Now you're able to get more from less.
Knows the
Okay.
system.
Excuse me?
Well, she, at that point, knows the system, knows what's expected when she's wearing the collar.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right? So all this is to give you kind of like a methodology that you can continue to make progress.
Yeah.
Because before, when I would tell people to increase the pressure, they wouldn't recognize on their own when to increase the pressure.
Yeah.
Right? So now having the structure of 3 taps and or 3 corrections, it keeps the client continuously going. And
Right.
the only thing that'll really stop them is if they feel bad about going higher. Because
Yeah.
some people might feel like, well, Jesse, once I hit 55, I felt bad for the dog. I'm like, well, that's why we didn't make any progress, because you stopped at 55.
Yeah.
And that's why the dog kept pulling.
Yeah.
Okay? So learning the concept of heel is a very quick thing for dogs. It's just a matter of, is the owner willing to go to the level needed to get the dog to adhere to the healing position no matter the environment? Okay? So like it could be 45 in my facility, it could be 85 if you're at the park,
Yeah.
35 when you're in the neighborhood and it's quiet. Like all these things are things that factor in on what the number is going to be. Environment, is the dog under stress? Is the dog under stress? Is there other things going on? And then you're just kind of adapting to the situation. Okay. Questions on any of this stuff so far?
No, I mean, yeah. I guess, yeah, I'm getting it. Like it's like you have to put the right framework in for them to understand basically what's expected.
Correct. Because when you're starting lower to higher,
Yeah.
you're giving her the opportunity to technically respond lower.
Yeah.
Right? So if I go to 45, I didn't pick 45.
Right.
The dog picked
Yeah.
45,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Because if she would have given me everything, like stopping the whining and all that stuff
Yeah.
at 15, we would be at 15.
It's interesting. I guess I'd never thought of it that way. It's like, it's more just like what are their tolerances for them to come to you with this understanding rather than.
Right.
It's not like we have to like force understanding what a heel is on them. It's like, what's she willing to put up with to
Correct.
avoid it?
Because everybody has a breaking point. So
Yeah.
obedience is meant to be functional.
Yeah.
And I think now people look at obedience as like this thing that they do in a room with their dog because it's fun.
Yeah.
Which you can, right? With treats and everything.
Sure, yeah.
But when we go out into the real world, it's also meant to be applicable
Yeah.
so that like walking your dog is enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're not having to worry about the anxieties of, is my dog going to be reactive or is my dog going to, become defensive when the person says hi to me?
Yeah.
Right? So like I have a case right now. Like, oh, she just, okay. I thought she was going to lay down. Do you have Cooper's remote? Yeah. So, let me think here. I have a case right now with the dog's Birdie. She's a Great Pyrenees. She's a nervous dog. And the first time I walked up, like even just coming here, was already lunging and barking, right?
Really? Wow. Yeah.
So I coached the owner, we find the number, we stopped the reactivity using the pressure, much like you stopped the whining, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we did the heel work.
Yeah.
I saw them the second class. She barked like once or twice, the owner stopped it within a second.
Yeah.
The third time I saw her, nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And within class 1 to 2, they took her to a farmer's market and we're walking through a farmer's market.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And they're like, Jesse, this could have never have been done before. And I was like, it's because we're using the appropriate amount of pressure to get the dog to listen,
Yeah.
right? But if we were to be too focused on working lower because they're worried more about the dog, but now the owner's under stress all the time because they don't know if the dog's gonna be reactive or not.
Right.
So this is meant to be serious, and we make it serious through physicality.
Yeah.
So like me growing up being old school, like raised old school, like my mom said don't do that, I got whooped. And that's what made don't do that, like, okay, like that's a thing
Yeah.
I want to avoid.
Yeah. I know
Okay?
what's gonna happen if I do. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So other questions on any of that stuff?
No, everything so far makes sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So here, like even just now,
Yeah.
earlier when you were stationary, what was she doing?
I'm whining, looking around, moving around, trying to lie down. Is that what
Yeah,
you're going
doing a
for?
bunch of other
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
right? And ever since we put in more pressure,
Yeah.
and you corrected it that one time for whining,
She's just solid here.
she's
right?
just sitting there.
Okay.
Now, is she comfortable?
Doesn't look like it.
No, she's not comfortable, right? She's not comfortable because of the amount of pressure.
Yeah.
So when we see this, people tend to be deterred. And they
Yeah.
go like, oh, but the dog looks anxious, the dog
Yeah.
looks nervous. I'm like, it's normal. I didn't walk away from a spanking smiling.
I wouldn't say she's like dying of fear. She just looks like she isn't sure what's going on.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's because it's the first time she's getting appropriate discipline.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a transition, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So here, when we're working with like reactivity or anything, reactivity is a stress response. Okay. This is happening. I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to become defensive.
Yeah.
Right. E-collar is also a stressor. So what we're doing here is we're using the level of pressure to technically get her to stress out more about you than she would about the environment.
Yeah.
So earlier when you mentioned, like, I said I teach traditionally on the left, and you're like, well, she has like boundaries with dogs and people and stuff. Technically speaking, with this, it wouldn't matter.
Sure.
Because she's so concerned about you.
Yeah.
Because this is real. If she deviates from the leg, pressure kicks in.
Right.
So she's thinking like, you know what, dog? You're the least of my problems now.
Sure.
Because now if I stray from my dad's left leg, 50 happens.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
So that's why I was like, you determine. If you want to walk on the right side, sure.
Yeah.
But I walk her on the right side because I want to walk her on the right side, not because I'm like, well, she would do better on the right side. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So
No,
all
it
this
definitely does, yeah.
is all accomplished through pressure. Okay, so in the beginning, because
and like I'm willing to make her be uncomfortable because honestly, when she's comfortable, that's when I'm sometimes uncomfortable, right? Like she wants to go crazy, jump on people.
Oh, sure,
you know,
yeah.
That stuff, and I'm like, well,
right,
you're happy, but the rest of us
exactly.
aren't. Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing about a lot of training now. Everything's like, oh, don't tell the dog no, right? Like,
yeah, and that's ridiculous.
No, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I actually have another client who came from a force-free trainer, and it was like, you can't say no.
How do they do it? I mean,
Exactly.
Do they get results at all?
Well, there was a joke that was on TikTok because this trainer was like, don't yell at your dog and don't use your leash to ever try to pull your dog to you. So then another trainer commented, I was like, well, what if the dog is ticking off? Are you not going to yell at your dog to come back or use the leash to stop your dog from coming back?
I feel like part of it's just safety too. Like I don't want my dog to run into the street, or I don't want her to react to kids in a bad way.
Right, because unfortunately, if that happened, who pays for it?
The owner,
Yeah.
So
here, the discomfort that we see now, as you expose her more, will go away. Because she's going to learn, oh, if I'm non-reactive, if I don't whine, if I don't try to lay down, if I just stay at my owner's right hip,
everything's good.
We're fine. I can avoid pressure.
Yeah.
And that was me growing up, right? Like I learned what the consequences were, and I was like, all right, well, if I just don't talk back to my mom, if I go to sleep by my bedtime, if I, eat my fruits and vegetables and shit, like I don't get spanked.
As adult, pay my taxes, nobody shows up.
Exactly, don't run a red light, you don't get a ticket. It's the same thing for the dog, but unfortunately for them, it's all about physicality.
Right.
Because they don't have a sense of like financial, like
can't
punishers.
Reason with them with English,
Yes, we can't put them in timeout and hope they reflect because that's not a thing that dogs do. So that's why all this is so effective from the get-go. Okay,
Right.
It's because we're using physicality, which is her language, but then also doing it in a way that she can process and understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so most of the time when people train dogs, they train dogs the way a human would process and understand. She's not able to think like that.
Right.
But what we can do is I can dumb it down because you're able to think on all these different levels, and I can bring you down to a dog's primitive level. And you can go, oh, wow, that makes sense now that you remove all these other things like the human would usually think. Okay? So questions on any of this so far?
No, so far so good. I'm sure I'll have a ton of questions.
It's okay.
After I leave,
So when it comes to practicing this stuff,
Yeah.
dogs learn better in smaller chunks. So 3 20-minute walks a day would be ideal.
Yeah.
Okay? If all you have is a solid hour to work with her one day, that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. She would just learn slower.
So you're saying repetition throughout the day is better than one
Solid training
Okay,
session.
that's
correct.
fine. Yeah.
Okay. So 3 20-minute walks,
Yep.
2 30-minute walks.
Yeah.
But the more you do it the day, so like right now, every time we stop right now, she's like processing everything that just happened.
It's going to reinforce it when we do it later.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you play an instrument at all? No? So I play guitar.
I used to play piano, I guess.
Okay.
Let's say that, yeah.
Sure. So like with stuff like scales and everything,
Yeah.
my teacher would always say like, don't spend 8 hours practicing your guitar.
Do it every day a little bit.
Exactly,
Yeah,
multiple
yeah.
times a day, and then you learn it faster.
Right.
So it's the same thing for the dog. We go smaller chunks multiple times a day.
Okay.
So once she's trained and you have the heel concept down, you would just go out and walk your dog. So in the beginning, you're training as you're walking her, but you're splitting it up into 3 times a day.
Yeah.
But then once you're like, yeah, Jessie, she knows heel. I can tell her to heel. Boom, she's at my hip, and we can walk for miles nonstop, and she won't pull or be reactive.
Right.
Then I go, great. Now you just use it every time you go for a walk. You don't need to do training sessions to teach it anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how we get our obedience to be applicable.
Yeah.
is now when you go for a walk, what you do is you go outside, let her potty first. Pee and poop, get that out the way. Then find your working number, 40. Then begin your walk, okay? So like let's say you have 20 minutes to walk with her and you want to go point A to point B. You would only turn when she passes you and tap to correct her. And if you have to go back for point B, you would slow turn and then make your way back again, okay? Now, what can happen sometimes is on the way back, the dog will forge because they're thinking, they're going home and they're thinking, I want this stupid exercise deal, okay? So if it's,
let's get this over with.
Crap, I don't have time, you would just simply come to a stop. Do you have a release word from before?
Free or okay.
Free?
Yeah.
So you would stop. She should stop with you.
Yeah.
Free. And then just let her pull home.
Yeah.
Because you've said free, that is the end of the exercise. It will not impact your training.
Okay.
So she can pull you home, all right? But when you're in the healing exercise, she cannot pull you. You have to turn.
So a couple questions. So for starting the exercise, is there a tap to start, or is it just kind of like, let's go, and then?
Right, so once you find the working number, typically once you hit that number, because now she's learned what she's supposed to do.
Oh, okay, so she'll know.
She's probably
okay,
gonna default.
I know what's going on.
So when you tapped her for the whining earlier, what did she do?
She actually kind of came to a position.
She came in closer, because she's thinking, well, just now, tapping, when I felt the tap, when I came here, it disappeared.
Right.
So she used that as a frame of reference. So she stopped whining but came in closer.
Yep.
So for you, when you're finding your working number, let's say she's over here straying and you're tapping and bumping it, and you hit 40 and you see her come here, that's the visual cue for you, like, okay, that's probably where we're gonna start, because she went from over there to over here, because that's what she learned turns off pressure.
Right.
And then you would start your walk, okay? So then during the walk, it's just what number is gonna keep her at your side.
And then when we're walking and she gets ahead of me, it's always a turn to correct it? Okay.
And a tap.
Okay.
Always turn and tap. So, and always an abrupt
I'll look a little crazy
turn.
on the sidewalk.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay. And the rate of your turns should go down every walk.
Yeah.
So if every walk gets 20 turns, it's because we're not going high enough.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then you'll come to notice, like, man, ever since I hit 55, no turns, right? It's literally black and white, night and day. Like once you hit that right number, the dog's like, all right, I'm here.
And then sniffing, all that stuff, that's cut out as well.
Unless you tell her free.
Free, okay.
So like, let's say you're walking with her in a heel,
Yeah.
or like in the exercise, and she's doing really well, and you come to the park and you stop, and she should stop with you, and you decide like, you've done a great job, free. Pee, poop, roll around, sniff the ground, smoke a cigarette, I don't care. She's on her own time.
Yeah.
And then once you're ready to go, you would start walking and tap. Boom.
We're working. Okay.
And now we're working again.
Gotcha.
So the tap is ultimately what turns everything on.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the human, it's confusing because we're used to words.
Yeah.
So the owner's like, how do I know my dog knows? I'm like, they don't need the word. They don't even know what the word is after you teach them. They just associate what to do in response to the word.
Yeah.
Okay, so she thinks when I hear come, if I go to dad, pressure goes away.
Yep.
She doesn't know that come in the dictionary means to return.
Right.
Okay, so free, you have to have an off switch. So free is your off switch.
Yep.
She's clocked out of work. She can pee, poop, sniff, do her doggy thing. Okay. Otherwise, if you've tapped her and put her in the exercise, it's in effect until you cue her to be done.
Okay.
Okay. So think of obedience as clocking into work.
Yeah.
And when she's clocked into work, she has to perform the task. Nothing else. No sniffing, no peeing, no pooping, no pulling, no barking, none of that nonsense. Okay. But then when you stop and say free, there you go. Okay. So when it comes to this, there's no such thing as too much, technically speaking. So like, let's say you took her on 5 20-minute walks a day. That would be okay. But my general rule is 3. But people always wonder, like, is 4 too much? I go, technically no, because you're only tapping and turning when the dog passes you. It's not like if there's continuous, correction the entire time. If there is, something's wrong.
Yeah.
It should be making the progress every time.
Yeah.
So that's why you can practice the heel as many times as you want throughout the day. There's no such thing as too much. Or like if once the dog learns the concept of heel, like I could heel a dog for 2 hours. And they're not gonna think like, oh my God, this is frustrating, because it's just as long as you walk on my side, there's no pressure. Okay? So stuff like that you can do as many times as you want. But the general rule of thumb is 3 times 20 minutes a day.
Sure.
Okay? Other questions?
No.
When you come to a stop, this is technically more advanced, but she's kind of already been doing it, is she should automatically sit,
Yep.
right? I'm not gonna care about exact positioning.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Like right now, she's out of position.
Right.
But she's been holding this sit position
So
for
that's
at least
good.
the last 5 to 8 minutes that
Yeah.
I've been talking, right?
Yeah.
But that's what 45 has accomplished.
Yeah.
Because she's thinking, well, crap. Now she lays down.
Yeah, no,
Pull up,
good.
and then relax. Perfect.
Good. Good.
But now she's thinking like, I want to avoid 45.
Right.
Okay. So you should start to see like a shift where you're like, wow, like ever since I started operating at a higher number, all of a sudden everything else is kind of getting better. Because she knows the stuff, it's been conditioned and it's been taught.
Yeah.
It's just not important enough for her to do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like every possible event that could happen. So basically, this is all great. The reason I was like, okay, I really need to do training again was because like greetings are just so terrible.
Yes.
So, and I know we're not like quite there, but is the idea that, it would be like position, like in position.
Oh, and like somebody says hi,
Yeah.
and she doesn't jump.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then is there like a free moment or something, or?
Right. So in training, we have prevention and intervention.
Yeah.
Prevention
Let's say like
is-
I go to my family's house and like we go and
Uh-huh.
it's all good.
Uh-huh.
And then like what's the what's like the real world like event like where I can like, do I let her go at some point, or how do I handle that?
So with the two of prevention and intervention,
Yeah.
is like, let's say you're in a heel. You come to a stop, she automatically sits.
Yeah.
And you see your neighbor come out, and they're like, hey, Ruby.
Yeah.
And she tip or up. There you go. Exactly. So we're gonna use that. So go ahead and shorten your leash, like you were holding before.
Yep.
So go ahead and shorten it. Shorten it some more.
Like to here?
A little bit more. More. Right there.
Okay.
Okay. So the reason why we're doing it this way
Yeah.
is because here you're limiting her range of motion. Okay. So like let's say you're in a heel, you come to a stop, she auto sits.
Yeah.
And your neighbor comes out.
Yeah.
Like, oh, Ruby, how are you? Right. Up, tip, and then relax. Right.
Yep.
So here, she's giving in.
Oh yeah.
So what you're doing is you're correcting, but this is prevention.
Yeah.
Because prevention is my dog is in command, so since she's in command, she can do nothing but the command.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's prevention. If my dog is sitting and respects the sit because she knows there's consequence,
Yeah.
she's not going to want to jump up, nor is she going to want to lay down.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's prevention.
Okay.
Intervention is you're at the park, she's off leash, your neighbor walks up like, hey, and Ruby looks and starts running to go say hi and be excited and jump. You would correct, and what you're telling her is even though you're not under command, you still can't jump. So you're intervening as the behavior is happening.
And then what would happen is the best bet that she would come to me. And
So
tell her,
technically speaking, she should stop the jumping,
Oh,
but
okay.
stay in the context.
Okay.
Right? So if the person is petting her and she's jumping, we would correct the jumping, but then she'd go back to be pet, and she could be excited and like wiggle and roll on her back and give her
See,
belly.
that's what I want her to be able to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but all we're saying is jumping is off the menu.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So yeah. So it's just saying don't do that, but all this other stuff is an
okay,
option,
yeah.
and that's prevention and intervention.
Yeah.
Prevention is I have control over my dog that we're not going to see anything.
Yeah.
Intervention is okay. My dog is off the clock and technically could jump.
Right.
But when I'm teaching them that that's
I want to
not
have
an
that
option.
option to stop it, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's a balance of both things because there's no set answer. It's not like obedience is black and white. Life is not. You're gonna hit gray area a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like.
I guess that was my question basically. Is like how do I navigate those kind of like it's like.
Correct.
I didn't tell you not to do it, but yeah.
Yes, but you can still correct it. So like if
Yeah.
Ruby jumped on the wrong dog, they would just bite her.
Right.
There is no conversation.
They're like, don't do that. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because people always think like, well, it's unfair to correct the dog for something they don't know. I'm like,
Yeah.
really? Because dogs do that to each other all the time.
You're right.
You
Yeah.
know? And like this was a dog that didn't want to go in the kennel.
Jesus.
There was no conversation. The dog didn't sit down to me with me and was like, Jesse, I don't like going in the kennel. It makes me very uncomfortable.
It's been a long day, man.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? The dog was just like, nah, boom. That was it. And the
Yeah.
dog's not aggressive. The dog just had never been in the kennel before and felt threatened being put into a kennel.
Yeah.
Okay? So that was the conversation. And I didn't dub the dog aggressive. I just told the owner, your dog freaked out and panicked because he was unaware of what I was trying to do with him
Yeah.
and became defensive.
Yeah.
So same thing here. If Ruby goes to, so like let's say I take a dog, I've never met the dog in my life,
Yeah.
and I take them for a walk and they become reactive, I can correct it day one. At that exact moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that was possible, I guess. Yeah.
It's because people are taught it's unfair.
Yeah.
But logically speaking, you cannot teach the dog that it is fair.
You're right.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's why I use dog-to-dog examples, because people are like, you're right. I've been to the dog park, and my dog got bit by another dog because he tried to mount him. Like, yeah, there was no conversation prior to that. It just happens.
They're pretty rough with each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, they bite their puppies.
Yeah.
As young as 3 to 4 weeks, they start to bite their puppies to correct them.
Yeah.
So they're already using physicality at that very young age.
Yeah.
So when people get their dogs at 2 months, and then they stop physicality because they think it's cruel or harmful or abusive, inhumane. I go, but another dog would bite your puppy, no problem.
Yeah.
It just has to be done correctly, which I would agree with, right? Like, if you're like just kicking your puppy for no reason, like, that's abuse. But if you give your puppy a poke because it's like chewing on the furniture, like, your dog is fine.
And you have to stop it when they respond correctly.
Exactly. So same thing with the driving thing, right?
Yeah.
They're putting pressure on you and you switch lanes. They would just keep going. Pressure is now resolved.
Yeah.
No more problems.
Yeah.
Okay. So, other questions?
What do we got, Ruby? No, I don't think so. This is definitely giving me a lot to think about, and just like how to kind of go about our day almost.
So like when you're on a walk with her,
Yeah.
if you're thinking if you're like questioning, should I correct this?
Yeah.
Chances are you probably should.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Because every time a client always asks that question and they tell me what happens or what's happened, I'm like, yeah, you should have corrected that. It's you recognizing that something is off, but you're just being doubtful because most people don't want to overcorrect.
Right.
Right? But unless you're doing it completely and blatantly wrong, in my book, there's really no such thing. Okay?
So for tapping here, it would be it's either during a turn.
If she's passing.
So, okay, yeah, so I guess, the better way to say it is like, okay, she's pulling, okay, turn, tap her into position, or if she's behind me, tap it to get her to come up to me.
Correct.
Those are kind of the two.
Or if she's too far off to the side.
Oh, okay, I can do that too.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. So it's easier, like if she goes to your left side, it's very obvious, right? You just pull to the right, tap to bring her over.
Yeah.
When she's straying to the right, you can technically keep forward and tap, and it should just bring her in to close the gap.
Yeah.
Or technically turn, but usually just going forward and tapping is enough to bring the dog in.
Yeah.
If she's really understanding the concept that tap means come to my right leg, it's gonna be like this. Like you'll literally tap and just see her come in. So like let's say you're walking and she strays to sniff the grass and you tap her, it should look super obvious. You're like, oh wow, that one tap just brought her straight to my side, and you just keep walking.
Cool, yeah.
So e-collar should never feel like an argument.
Yeah.
If you're feeling like you're arguing with Ruby, you're probably too low. Okay, that's my general rule. Okay.
Been doing that for over a year now. Yeah.
If your dog is yelping, you're probably too high. If your dog's not listening, you're probably too low.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are like the boundaries that I go by.
Yeah.
So you have 100 levels.
Yeah.
Some people feel limited, and they're like, well, my trainer only told me to go to 25. That's the highest. I shouldn't need more than 25. I'm like, well, your trainer's an idiot because you might need more than 25. I'm like,
Right.
You have 100 for a reason. Okay. She tells you. So if you're at 65 and she's yipping and yelping and things aren't getting
the
better,
tool, right?
it's
Yeah.
because you're using it wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. We would go down lower in that sense.
Okay.
So in the beginning, so like with the yipping with her, like with the that we saw here,
Yeah.
it was actually getting less, and she was actually doing better.
That's true, yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that,
Yeah.
right? So we would technically go down lower, but sometimes you end up going down lower, and then your dog pushes the boundaries more, and then you end up going up higher again.
Yeah.
So it's like this just kind of roller coaster ride of up and down.
Yeah.
So if you're remoting her and it's consistently yelping, but she's doing what you want, try going down lower.
Okay.
And then maybe go from 45 to 40, and you're like, I tapped her, Jesse, and she came right to my side, but no yelp. Then I go 40 was the correct number. Because
Yeah.
you got what you wanted, but you also did not get vocalization. Okay?
Yeah.
Sometimes vocalization can be just surprise and or frustration, and also physical discomfort. Okay? But people tend to assume physical discomfort.
Surprise is kind of how I interpreted that from her just now. Yeah. It seemed like.
Right. I mean, because has she had
shit.
45 before?
No, yeah, not really, yeah.
Yeah. Because now we're at an impactful number and intensity that she's like, oh, like
Yeah.
this is a thing now.
Yeah.
And that's what changes their perception.
Yeah.
If my mom was not willing to spank me growing up as a kid, I probably would have been a badass kid. You know, she had to have been willing to go there
Right.
and spank me when needed, so that I'm like, all right, like that sucks. So I'm not gonna do that. You know, same thing for the dog. If your dog needs 85 and you're not willing to go to 85, well, then you're gonna have problems with your dog.
So basically, if I was to like sum this all up, like no matter what excites Ruby or even like freaks her out, what I'm teaching her to do is just like not give a shit about any of that stuff and just always be focused on this bubble.
What you're doing.
Right. Be focused on me.
Correct.
And it doesn't matter if a dog that scares her walks in to the park or whatever.
Yeah.
She's like, this matters more.
Correct.
Okay.
So what helps her have control over that impulse
Yeah.
is when you put discipline on the dog, this helps calm dogs down. So that the dog earlier talked about Birdie. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Good
Yeah,
point.
wait a moment. So see how she's licking her lips, right? And she goes back to panting here. So that her lip licking was like, that correction sucked, right? And then she lets it go.
I've noticed she does like nervous
Lip licking?
Yeah, lip
Yeah.
licking, yeah.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
So now I go, all right, we did 30 to 45 minutes of talking and all that stuff
She
from
did
that
pretty
first
good.
correction,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But that's how much time it got you.
Yeah.
So now it might be an hour before she whines again like that.
Yeah.
You get a bigger gap.
Sure.
So with Birdie, the dog that was reactive when I showed up, right? The first class, you know, I just did a few things, a little bit of correcting the reactivity,
Yeah.
and I said, I'll see you in a week. And when I came back, it was just a real easy shutdown. But they were able to do all these other things that they could have never have done before because the discipline had calmed her down.
Interesting.
So now so like there was in the video, they're like walking and somebody went to hand them a flyer, and they're like, this is crazy. Like typically she'd like try to attack that person,
Yeah.
and she just walked past her no problem.
Yeah.
I go, yeah, because now she's in a passive state. Okay.
see.
So what we do is we do this exercise. You practice it 3 times a day, 7 days for the week, and you come back, and I want to know how does it change her behavior.
Yeah.
And you might find, like, you know what, Jesse went to the park, some dogs came in that she would normally blow up at, she didn't care. Somebody came up around the corner and surprised us, she didn't care. Like all these things that would normally trigger her, she didn't care. I go, great. The heel and the remote and the intensity and the level is doing everything that I needed to do. Because we're thinking we're gonna go out and make her be a bad dog and punish all that stuff. That's how most people think.
Right. Yeah, you're right. That's
Right?
kind of my first reaction to
Right,
the
is like-
system. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, it is an approach, but I want to see what does this fix?
Yeah.
And whatever's left over, then I go, okay, it didn't fix that stuff, but we fixed at least 80% with this one exercise.
Sure.
And then we start to nitpick at things that wasn't addressed. Okay. Other questions?
No, I don't think so. So basically, like, just you want me to be pretty disciplined about this, kind of think about how she's reacting to it and anything else while we're doing this, and then kind
No,
of let you
like
know.
don't.
Or,
So like, let's say there's something that you would typically avoid
Yeah.
because she would be reactive.
Yeah.
What you could do this week is like if you're on the sidewalk, grass, curb is typically the kind of makeup
Yeah.
of the streets now.
Yeah.
Is I would just step into the curb facing the sidewalk and shorten the leash to see what does she do
yeah.
with the
Whatever that
stimuli in
stimulus is,
passing.
Yeah,
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. If nothing happens, then you go, oh wow, like typically she'll blow up with this, and she didn't.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're seeing a situation, you're like, yeah, this doesn't look good. Feel free to cross the street, you know.
Yeah.
And then any opportunities that you see that you think that would be productive, I would use to your advantage.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why I had you shorten your leash earlier when I was going to approach,
Yeah.
is like, let's say she did try to jump. Well, she's not going to get very far.
Instantly, she would get that. like,
Exactly. So
correct,
you allow her to jump, but you limit how far she can actually get with the jump.
Yeah.
And then it allows you to correct her without, because as soon as she makes contact,
Yeah.
she's being reinforced and she's going, well, I wanted to jump on the person. I got to do it anyways.
Yeah.
And they'll be willing to take the hit just to jump on the person.
Yeah.
So it's like you allow the action, but she doesn't get to fulfill it. And she gets the correction. She's like, oh crap, well, I tried to jump. I couldn't get to them. Plus I got hit at 45. What's the point?
Right.
And then you start to see her choose other things.
So one thing I had heard, and I don't know that I think it's true, but
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that the prong and the e-collar together can be kind of an exhausting combo for some dogs.
Nope.
You're okay with it?
No, it's perfectly fine because think of the prong collar as like just like more physical leverage.
Yeah.
So like right now with when she tried to lay down,
Yeah.
a lot of dogs when you use a flat collar, they'll just melt. and you're holding them in the flat collar and they're like this, like a puppet, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to use more remote to get them to pop up. Well, whereas with the prong, they'll catch it and they're more likely to sit up with less pressure.
Okay.
Okay. So you'll most likely get to a point where you won't even need the prong anymore. You'll just need the flat collar and your remote collar.
Okay.
But in the beginning, it's nice to have as extra leverage. They actually work really, really well together. The only reason I don't really do the prong and the e-collar is because sometimes I don't know what's doing the work, the prong or the e-collar, because it's 2 points of pressure, okay? But that's why that leash slack is important, because if the leash is slack, the prong's not doing the work.
Right.
The e-collar is.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay? Other questions?
No.
So your homework for this week, 3 walks a day,
Yep.
20 minutes, let her potty first, find your working number, always starting at 15,
Yep.
working your way up, 3 taps, no response, bump at 5 levels.
Yeah.
And then just tracking where you end up at.
Yeah.
You know, and then when you come back, I'll just ask you questions to kind of get a feel for where she's at.
Yep. Yeah.
And then from there, just build on it.
Okay.
Keeping tabs on anything that you might see where you're like, she would normally be reactive to or overstimulated with. And if you notice any shifts, then keeping track of that.
Okay.
So if you're like, 80% of her excitement is like, good, I go, great, that just leaves us 20%.
Yeah.
And if 60% of her reactivity is done, great, that just leaves us 40%.
Yeah.
Okay, we just kind of build on that stuff. Okay?
Cool, man. Yeah.
Other questions?
No. There's a lot to think about.
Okay. Right now, when you get ready to exit, what you would probably do is just say free.
Yeah.
Because since she's stressed out about the exercise, she's probably going to want to just forge out.
Yeah.
So you just say free and let her just forge out. And then same thing for your walks. If you notice she wants to forge home, if you don't have the time to correct it, stop, free,
Best bet.
just
Okay,
go.
yeah.
But now I would go, okay, she wants to forge home, so I'm going to spend 5 minutes walking away from home, give myself 15 minutes to walk back home.
Sure.
Right? So you can commit to all the corrections. But if you're tight on time with work or whatever,
Yeah.
free, and it doesn't matter what she does.
Okay.
Okay? Other questions?
No, I don't think so. I was kind of curious. So you guys keep a pretty tight ship in here, huh? Like no vocalization or anything?
Yeah, there's a little bit of whining earlier because we had a new guy training.
Yeah.
So that's why Elias was like more so focused on him. And I was telling him to correct like Dexter and Cooper.
Have you noticed, like, so when she's stayed here, like, is she pretty vocal with you guys, or is she really?
No.
Like, I would have pictured that she would be the loudest of all of these dogs.
No, she's
They
a
somehow-
little
she
like
is-
loaf of bread just
That's
sleeping.
so weird, man. I can't believe it.
Yeah. But it's because from day one, it was just like
Here's
structure,
the rules. Yeah.
as opposed to here's funsies
Yeah.
and then try to put in rules.
Yeah.
So, because people always ask like, how did you get it? Because we had like this is a slow day because it's the weekend. We get 25 dogs.
Yeah. Right.
But we had like 45 dogs one day, and a client was like, "This is crazy! Like there's dogs playing, dogs on the tread, dogs on the placemats. Everybody was just quiet."
Yeah.
And they're like, "How do you do this?" And I was like, "Well, I started with day one. We had 1 dog here, quiet, right? Then we built to 2 dogs. Then we built to 8
Always
dogs.
the same, right? Yeah.
Quiet.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it was a lot of work teaching everybody. But since it was started from the beginning, it's easy to uphold.
Yeah.
Instead of like worrying more about numbers and getting 80 dogs in here and
Yeah.
then trying to get 80 dogs under control.
Yeah.
I said, no. I'm like, we're gonna start slow, and every dog's gonna get the same structure. So by the time I hit 40 dogs, it's still as quiet as it is when we only had 1 dog.
She's been a real handful for me with, like, since day one with crate training. And
Oh, really?
yeah, people
That's
are just
interesting.
like, you just gotta break her. Like, you're just gonna leave her and teach her that barking doesn't get her out. And, and then it's like 4 hours later, I was like,
She's still barking?
fucking, like, you can't do this. You know?
Bark collar?
So that's what we use now.
Yeah.
And it's pretty good. But
Is she still trying to bark through it?
for the first few minutes.
What's the level you have it at?
Maybe I should go higher. Maybe like halfway. I forget. It's like of 8.
Of 8, yeah.
So there's like 4. I'm at maybe 4 of 8 because I get those pretty loud surprise vocalization. Like she'll bark and like make this weird yip, and then she'll bark again, and
In response?
freaks me out. But I don't know.
Correct. So with the bark collar, because the bark collar operates differently than the e-collar.
Yeah.
Because it's just trying to suppress and or stop a behavior.
Yeah.
Does yours count the number of barks?
Yes.
How many barks on average would you say you come home to?
Usually I'll come home to like not that many, like 4 or 5.
4 or 5? I'd probably jump to 6, 7.
Okay. Yeah. But
'Cause
you
it's a
know,
pretty harsh
that's a
correction.
good, because sometimes it's way higher than that, and it's like
Sure.
what was
So
going
it's
on?
either not fitted correctly
Yeah.
or the intensity is too low.
Okay.
Because stress will override the collar.
Do you mind if I bring the bark collar next time?
You can.
To look at
I'll take a look
I know
at it.
Not to like test it, but I just want to see what you would think about like how
I could fit it for you.
Yeah.
And then, is it? Do you know the brand?
It's e-collar brand.
Technologies, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the one that we use.
Okay, yeah.
So like the Barkless Pro, whatever.
Something like that.
Anti-bark collar, yeah. So it's in my opinion, that's like one of the best bark collars.
Yeah.
So I would increase it to about 6 or 7, and then fit it like you have this one. Like this one's fitted correctly.
Yeah.
And then the only thing would be, do you have it fitted with like a comfort adapter?
No. I don't
Do you
think
have it on more than 2 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you noticed her get any pressure sores or anything?
Yeah, actually, I was getting kind of freaked out because she has on this side. I think it's better now. She had a little like red spot from.
It's from the box sitting in the same spot
Yeah.
because of the 2 probes. So it's not the stem. It's 2 probes poking in the neck for a long time.
So this one I was taught it's different from that. Where
Oh, sure, you have to put on the throat.
Yeah, the
Correct.
throat, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Because that's a pickup on the vibration of the bark.
Yeah.
So when you put it on, I think it's stupid because bark collars, most likely the owner's gonna have it on for an extended period of time.
I only use it for crate when I'm gone.
Right.
Because she's not a very barky dog, like in general.
Just when she's in the crate.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So I would increase the level and then potentially fit it more snug. But then if she's going to be wearing it longer than 2 hours, you want to pick up a comfort adapter for the bark collar.
Okay.
And that's meant for extended wear. So she could wear it for 8 hours in the same spot, and we should get no irritation or pressure sores.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not from the stem, because people think like it's the e-collar burning the dog, and it goes, that's not what that is.
No, I didn't. Yeah. I figured it was just constant like rubbing out essentially, or just touching the skin. That's
Correct.
causing that.
So yeah, if you want to bring it and like show me how you fit it, I can let you know if you're fitting it correctly.
Okay. Yeah.
And then if you want a link to the comfort pads or whatever, you can just shoot us an email.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect, yeah.
Awesome. So homework, 3 times a day, 20 minutes a walk.
Got it.
Starting low, working your way up.
Yeah.
And then just noting like what differences you're seeing in terms of her behavior.
Perfect.
Okay?
Thanks a lot, man.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah, it's been really helpful.
And I'll grab your